back to the Experts channel, and today I'll be talking about 10 tricks to impress your friends, or just generally confuse your friends if that's what they consider impressive. But little mind tricks, tricks that'll be a good conversation starter for those introverts out there like me. um, so let's go ahead and start off with trick 1. This is one of those tricks that could get annoying, but do prove to humor up your group with friends. What the trick is every once in a while, no certain order, when you're talking to someone, you know the phrase "no pun intended." Whenever you're talking to someone, just wait a couple minutes, and then you're like, "Oh, well, something, something, something," and then say, "Yeah, I went over there. No pun intended." Make sure that when you're saying something, there really is no pun, because that's the kind of joke trick slash mind trick, is because the group of people you say that to will think very hard and try to find the pun in that sentence, and when they don't find the pun, if they're brave enough, they'll ask you, I don't get it," and you can just say what, and if they continue on, you can just tell them there was no pun, and it's just a kind of good conversation starter. I've used that trick many times. It does prove pretty hilarious in some cases, and people who are obviously introverts, you can tell by this trick as well, because they won't say anything because they don't want to. They're too scared to question your judgment, because they might be introverts as well. But yeah, that was trick 1. Trick 2. Now the next trick, I could consider a trick, but if you're ever persuading someone, and maybe this proves worthy in an interview, I don't know, not at that point in my life yet, but when you're talking to someone, if you're trying to, if it has to be reasonable, you can't say dogs have 8 legs, right, and then nod. When you're talking to someone and trying to make your case, or make a point, if it's reasonable, if it's a reasonable point and it's not too controversial, if you slowly nod, 9 times out of 10, they're more likely to agree with you, even if it's not their prejudgment. And I did some research on this one. This was pretty impressive. I use that trick on my friends, and I guess it really is a kind of a trick, because usually it pushes them past their judgment. Because it's a general positive atmosphere that you make when you're nodding, like, yeah, so I think that the politics should steer towards this direction. And I mean, obviously, it can't be like, yeah, I think they should blow up the world. It can't be too dumb. I'm just gonna say it can't be too dumb. But yeah, that is trick 2. Yes, moving on to trick 3. Now, this impresses me. This trick doesn't always work. It's people who have heard this trick before that you gotta watch out for, and people who second guess themselves because this trick might not work. So you go through doubles. You go up to someone and say, "What's 1 plus 1?" They'll say 2. "What's 2 plus 2?" They'll say 4. And get all the way up to 8 plus 8. And when they say 16, then they say, name a vegetable. And they'll probably say carrot. Now that's not the big trick. What you do is, before you do the trick, you write down carrot on a piece of paper, and you make sure you're like, okay, I've written something down on this piece of paper, let me put it in my pocket, and then you do the trick. You go through 1 plus 1, and you get all the way to 8 plus 8, and when they 16, you say, quick, name a vegetable. They'll say, carrot. And I mean, this is only if it works. Usually it's probably about 8 out of 10 is what the statistic for. They say carrot, then you hand them the paper, and if they haven't done this trick before, they'll be mind blown. People are like, whoa, how does that work? And it really just depends on if you know the person, and if they are used to tricks like this and they try to think too much. It's people who are just comfortable talking to you is when you usually do this trick too. But yeah, that's trick number 3 to impress your friends. Trick number 4. This is a pretty simple one. What you do is, whenever you're in a big group, you say, hey, think of a number 1 through 7. And this kind of varies. Make sure it's not too big of a group, but generally, you say think of number 1 through 7, and they'll say okay, and I say is it 4? If they say no, then it's 7, because they don't want it to be the second number or second to last, or in that area they want it to be 4. He'll never guess that, or the last number or the first number. So generally they'll go for like 4 first, and that trick works. So you'd say again, think of a number 1 through 7, and then say, "Is it 4?" And if this trick is kind of risky, but it will impress some people, because even if you get it wrong, there's this sense of, oh, you know what you're doing. The trick didn't turn out the way it was. But yeah, trick that was trick number 4. Trick number 5. Am I right? Am I right? Let me check my list. Yes, trick number 5. And I really don't care at this point. These are just, if I give you extra tricks, it's not a big deal. You can always skip back to check me and harass me in the comments. But trick number 5. Let's say you were in a class or in some sort of meeting. When the person is talking, if you keep I know this sounds like a Disney movie, but if you keep your chin up in discussions, not in a narcissistic way or like, oh, I'm better than you, but if you keep it generally up, people are more positive. And I know that sounds that's stupid, that's silly, but it actually works. I've done some tests with this and with my groups of friends, and if you keep your chin up, or if you're a little more like not shaky, but if you're kind of moving a little bit during conversation, it diverts their eyes, and they're more likely to talk faster or feel more energy, and they'll be more positive. And that's just natural for when you have more energy pumping through you. When you're hyper, you feel more happy, and not in the cocaine or drug addiction way. But yeah, and yeah, that is trick number 5. Let's see, trick number 6. Trick number 6 comes into play when you're writing. It's to impress your friends. This is actually a trick you can actually learn from school. If you're a really good artist, or you're really good, linguist is what I should say. Whenever you're writing, think of the word you're putting down and think of if there's any better word to put there. I've used that in tests, and this is a trick to impress your teachers or your friends, really, if they're really into making sure their grades are okay. And it's just a general good trick to do. And trick number 7 is what I think we're on. Yes. Okay. So this trick is another funny vocal trick. When you're talking to someone, if you say something like, "Oh yeah, dogs have 8 legs," or something silly, if you kind of say it fast, but just so they understand it, and this helps if you want to make people sound a little silly, or if you have a group of friends that you can joke with. Just again, putting into that factor, like, oh, be really positive, be jumpy. When you're talking to someone, you can convince people of really stupid things. Now, this might be a trick to use on people that are not your friends, but if people convince you or label you as intelligent, or if you have the sense, not in a narcissistic way, don't let this go to your head, but like, let's say people consider you smart, or some people consider you smart, and you tend to use more proper language. What you can do is if you have a serious tone, honestly, if people don't consider you smart, but if you have a serious tone and enough confidence in what you say, sometimes you can convince people about anything. I'll give you an example. So, around my younger school career, people sometimes relied on me for certain things, like, hey, what's the answer? So, when I realized that people do consider me somewhat smart, I would say something like this in a serious tone, like, hey, did you know that in China, if you are flying there and you have a passport, you have to pay a $5 or 5 yen fine to go into the country at that time if your month of your birth starts with a J. And it's just so crazy. There are facts that are just that crazy that it was feasible enough where people believe me. And that's a really funny trick to use on your friends, is when you talk in a serious tone, people are obviously going to take you seriously. So you could say anything. I once convinced somebody that I was related to a basketball superstar just because of my extended family tree. And now, honestly, that's kind of. But this person knew me personally, like very personally. And so I said, "Oh, well, you know all my family, but you know that one other person, right?" And then I said, "Well, they know this person," and then they branched off. And I convinced people of simple things, or that might not always be true. Not necessarily to lie, but then you can say, "Hey, I just tricked you." And they're like, "What? But you sound so serious." Exactly. Now, that just applies to several ways you can use that trick. And it's silly enough to think, but all these tricks can be used in different tenses, which kind of count as more than one. But yeah, what are we on now? Step 9? Probably 8, but I'm not a very put together person, which is why I'm kind of an introvert. But a trick number 10. Now, this trick can be used to people who you don't know. When you're talking to a new group of friends, this is just a kind of a courtesy thing to impress your friends that you are currently have. If you see someone that you don't usually talk to, and you can get the sense that they might like the same things, ask them what they're into, and if they are into the same things, follow up with like, "Oh, have you read this? Have you?" And this is a simple conversation, but it really impresses people when you go out there and make new friends in front of your other friends. This is not like showboating, but when you are confident enough to talk to other people that you might not talk to much and grow your friend group, it can impress your friends like tenfold. And I have, oh no, wait, I just had this. Where did it, one more trick that I wanted to add on to it. Okay, when you forget someone's name and you just can't think of the person's name for the life of you, you can't think of it. There are two ways to do this. You can say, "Hey, what's your name again?" And they say, "Oh, it's John." And I'm like, "No, what's your last name?" And then they'll say your last name. You're like, "I remember your first name, John." And they'll say the last name. And that's one way. But the way I prefer is I go up and say, "Hey, do you know your name backwards?" And they're like, "I think so. It's this." I'm like, "Well, say your name." They'll say their first name, and you're clean. You're in the clean. You know their name now, and you don't have to feel guilty about forgetting it because they don't know that you forgot it. And those are my top 10-ish tricks. I'm not really organized. I wanted to do this in one recording because I don't like having to keep these little sections separate and specific, because I know that it won't be as fun to pay attention to because it'll sound too much like a cliche, trendy, crappy video that doesn't make any sense, and I wouldn't have a good explanation of it if I just kept it in sections. But yeah, that is how to 10 tricks ish on how to impress your 10 tricks how to impress your friends. I'm not impressing myself right now. Anyway, I will see you next time.